Hi, everybody, and welcome back. In this series, we are going to be focusing on the teacher transition journey. We'll be hearing from teachers who've made the transition into the corporate world. We'll be hearing from different teachers from different roles within the industry and hear their process, their story, and what has made them successful, as well as just hear what life is like post-transition. So tune in, turn it up, and let's get ready to do this. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the Edtech Guru. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me on this journey, for all the support that you give me, and for following along. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's get ready to do this. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today is an extra special episode as we are joined by my colleague and EdTech influencer, Scott Nunes, or as most of you know him on Twitter, MrNunesTeach. On this episode, we talk about what it's like to make the transition out of the classroom and what life has been like post-transition. I hope you enjoy this episode. Here we go. Scott, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you decided to leave the classroom?
Yeah, it's a crazy, wild journey. So I'm Scott Nunes. You could follow me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook at MrNunesTeach. I'm also on IG, but I'm kind of just blossoming over there. On there, I am Mr. EdTech. So I didn't think about this whole branding thing when I came up with that one. And yeah, the IG is like a mess. So I'm not on there a whole bunch. But essentially, backing up, taught myself how to code when I was 12, learned graphic design when I was 14, started my own business when I was 14 with some friends. That went on for a bit. We failed a ton, and I found myself freelancing a lot with graphic design. And then the economy tanked in 2008, 2009, took some time off, coached for a bit. I coached swim on and off for about a decade. And during that time, I was a stay-at-home dad for a while. And then I'm like, man, I got to get back to the workforce. Like I had some side hustles. One of them was being a book dealer. So I'd buy books online and at garage sales and then resell them. And got really good at that, but just wasn't what I wanted to do. I'm like, man, this takes so much time. Like you are always working, no matter what. You're always on the hunt searching, and settled on education. Finally, once I started taking classes, I realized like, hey, this is my jam. And then immediately I realized, wow, there's so much talent out here. Like, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna compete? And coming into the education game later on in life, in my early 30s, I quickly realized, hey, I can't just be a teacher. I need to do more. Otherwise, I'm going to be in my 70s working. That's not going to work. So, really played to my strengths with tech and ed tech, and went from an ELA teacher to being really focused on STEM and UDL, PBL, which led to being an instructional technology coach, which then led me here to where I'm at with Canva, but surprisingly, I'm in sales. It's totally different.
But it's not so different, right? Like education is a lot of like
Yeah.
selling yourself and different things like that. So now that you had quite the journey to find yourself into education. And Scott, if you don't know, make sure you follow him on Twitter. He's always putting out lots of nuggets of information, and he's quite the influencer in the edtech space. So if you haven't checked him out, definitely do that. But from the classroom to actually getting your job at Canva, what actually made you decide that that's the road that you wanted to take? Like actually basically leaving the education space, sort of.
You know what? The plan was really interesting. I set up a 4 to 6 year plan right when I started, and basically allowed myself a way out. And I knew my passions would lie with ed tech. I knew day one at my school when I met like who would become a teacher of the year, Mr. Chris Hayden. And that guy was the king of grammar. I'm like, man, this guy's so amazing. Like, I don't know that I could ever be as good as this guy. He's so good. It wasn't that I didn't believe in myself. The other part was he was so good. I knew it would take so long and so much time and energy to get that good. And to be frank, I just wasn't that passionate about ELA. So I knew I had to transition out of the ELA classroom. Like I knew almost instantaneously, like this will work, but I'm not really going to be the best ELA teacher. It's just not where my passions lie. Uh, I could do it, but I didn't want to go get a master's in English lit. I was burnt out on school. I couldn't take it in a direction I really wanted. So I wanted to create content um, that appealed to me. So, like you, I started a podcast and that really helped. I got involved in Twitter, and that's what really revolutionized my career. That's where my plan kind of went off the rails. So, I had this plan. I was going to get my master's in edtech, possibly get my PhD, get my admin credential, and go that route. But once I jumped on Twitter, I realized, you know what? I'm learning so much more than I ever learned in the university system or that I thought was possible. Let me just learn and see what's possible. And really, different people recognize different strengths within me and different skill sets. And my interests kind of waned and ebbed and flowed in different directions. So I started with gamification, but then fell in love with PBL and UDL and backwards design. And so, pedagogically speaking, like that's where my interest is. And then couple that with ed tech, I'm like, wow. But to be able to go to these conferences and to get these external learnings, like going to ISTE, I quickly learned like I have to put up my own money. And it was a lot of money. Like 2,600 for my first conference to go to School G Next, but it revolutionized my entire career. I have a bunch of buddies that are fairly wealthy. They're in different industries like real estate and they're making eight figures. And I asked them, you know, like, what's the key to your success? Why are you successful? What should I invest in? And they said, invest in yourself. And so I did that. I took that to heart, applied it, and that was the best advice. Yeah, cost money, but it allowed me to really be here because what got me to Canva from that instructional technology coach role was really my network. It wasn't like anyone kind of gave me all this praise, but I could point back to that in the interview process. And what was so cool was there was a school district that I used as my performance task. I said, hey, here's who I'm going to contact. Here's how I'm going to sell to them. Here are the pain points. Here's how I'm going to address that and how Canva is going to solve those pain points. And then I did just that. And so I carried out that plan. Now it took longer. I thought that plan was going to happen in 3 months. It took 6 months and it was still bumpy even after that. But like Canva says, if you can dream it, you can create it in Canva. So I created this job opportunity. And while sales is seemingly totally different, like I mentioned, there's a lot of crossover. But the key piece is can't shy away from hard work. The transition is huge. That's why so many people fail at it. But if you're determined, you're willing to take a risk, it's totally possible. It's not a smarts thing, it's not an intelligence thing. It's a
It's a hustle thing.
commitment to work. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you have
Yeah.
to be committed to the process. And I think that's why I've been successful in this arena too. Do you want me to
Yeah.
talk about how bad I did and how well I'm doing?
No, but we will talk a little bit more candidly because I believe in being as candid as possible with people. But what
Yeah.
I like about your journey, so we've talked, everybody has had such a unique experience to get where they're going. I volunteered, I did different networking events and different things like that. You started going to conferences and kind of, investing in yourself. And I think that's a really good tip and strategy is really investing in yourself because nobody is going to do it for you. Somebody
Right.
can tell you what to do or how to do it, but at the end of the day, you're the person driving the bus. So you have to believe in yourself. And I too, when I very first went to my very first ISTE, actually was like 7 years ago or something, popped up the other day. But I remember going to ISTE and thinking, oh my gosh, because I've been like teaching at professional development sessions and coaching and all kinds of things. But walking in there, I felt like a tiny, tiny little fish. And it was exhilarating for me. Like I loved being able to meet people and poke their brains and ask them questions. And some of those people that I met at ISTE are still in my network today. And I just think that going to conferences opens up your world outside of your district. And I think that's an important piece too, because like you said, Twitter has now become the place for nuggets, right, of information and being able to connect and share ideas. And it's such a meaningful experience. But those connections, no matter where they go, end up taking you well beyond, like you said, just the classroom. Like they present you with different opportunities. And I think that's really important to discuss. Also, I wanted to say when Scott was talking about his basically his task he had to do. So every single company, when you go to apply, you have several, and we mean this, several rounds of interviews. The first one's with a recruiter. The second one maybe with your direct team. The third one is typically a task that you do. And so everyone has a different task. For me, I had to, at each one of the positions that I worked at, something different. And so Scott is saying that he basically put together a task to basically how you can roll out Canva and have success in a school district, right?
Right.
So Scott, obviously you got the job at Canva, you nailed it. But then you started working at Canva and started really living and breathing, not the four walls of our education system. So how did you find that transition was for you from being, the star of the show at your district to kind of being,
Right.
Canva is kind of like the first time you go to ISTE. You're really a small little tiny fish in this very big ocean. So kind of having to figure out and find your way. So how have you found that to be?
I love that analogy. I would agree with that. So, yeah, coming from like a pond or a pool of talent where I'm one of the top talents to going to a place like Canva where you have such a wealth of experience and everybody is essentially an expert. Everybody's the best. They're coming from a top talent pool. It's like, oh, it's like I went from like a great university or something, and now I'm in the Ivy Leagues or close to it, right? There are people definitely at Canva who belong, in that realm of like top tier talent, right? With somebody like Guy Kawasaki, right? And our founders, they're definitely up there. So with that, yeah, it's a little intimidating. And right away, I just applied the same principles, the same formula. Get out there, expand your network, learn from people. Um, I had a VP from a different company talk to me and give me some coaching. And he said, you know what? If you just spend the 40 hours a week doing this job, you're going to hate it. You're not going to do really well. He said, this is new, especially coming from your field. He's like, I love hiring teachers, but most of them fail. And here's why. And he kind of laid out why. And one of the key things that stuck out to me, he said, hey, every day has to be a win. Every single day. If you can't, eke out a win the next day or that day, you need to try it the next day, basically, and learn from that, fail forward. And then he also said, you need to put in more time. So when I hinted at the hard work aspect, it's kind of like your first few years in teaching, you have to invest that much time. If you're not committed to that, you're going to fail. You just will. There's such a steep curve. There's so much to learn. Even if you're playing to your strengths and you know a lot, let's say you even go to like a community manager position and you're already doing um, Twitter chats and you're already a super ambassador for one or more companies and you've been there all along the way. There are just things you're not going to know and you're going to have to learn. And the business structure is totally different. And we're blessed at Canva. We have such a positive climate and culture that it really helps us with learning some things, but still nobody's going to help you. I mean, people will help you, but you have to do the hard work. They'll help you kind of refine your craft, but everybody's so busy doing their thing. There's only so much time you can get. So ultimately, you have to ask good questions. You said something earlier about asking questions. That's the other key piece. You have to ask those questions. And Jason Wilmot, my boss, will say, hey, if anything, over communicate. That's great advice. That's something that I've learned. I'm always hesitant, like everybody's so busy. I don't want to add more to their plate, but you know what? It just makes the communication very clear and better to over communicate and say too much than to say too little. So that would be another piece of advice with that.
I definitely think those are all really great points because it is
Yeah.
important to be able to communicate and ask questions. I too, coming from, sometimes I always tell teachers, like, don't veer away from like smaller startups just because you have an opportunity to learn a ton. At Canva, it's basically a lot of small little startups operating, but exactly what Scott was saying, I too have experienced that, like the serious imposter syndrome, because you're sitting in the room with people who have been at Facebook and at Google and or top people at Airbnb, just top level talent. And sometimes it's intimidating to think, oh my gosh, I was just tying shoelaces a few months ago. Not that I wasn't inspiring minds and, carrying this great workload and things like that, but it's just sometimes intimidating when you sit next to them and you're like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like I'm sitting in the room with these people. And so sometimes it takes a little bit to like realize that you're now one of them. So it's interesting, I think, as well. So I too had like a little bit of adjustment to do when I came to Canva too. So we feel the same way with that. So now that you have been, out of the classroom and kind of transitioning, a lot of teachers who I've had or featured on the podcast have talked about, mental health was a big reason for like why they left the classroom, or just, or space and time to think. Most people came straight from the classroom into there without being in like an instructional coach role. Do you feel like that played any sort of role for you as well? Or did you already feel pretty good, I guess you would say?
Oh, it was the perfect jumping off point. It let me know a few different things about myself. Like it showed me I could do kind of the impossible and set crazy big goals and make them happen. For example, at the onset of the pandemic, I was immediately brought into my instructional technology coaching role and helped put together 110 webinars in 8 days and deliver those 110 webinars in another 8 days. Like that's just insane. Like how do you do that? And I didn't think that was possible. And then to even be able to say like, hey, I was a part of that, like, wow, really just shows me like, hey, if I can dream it, I can do it. Like Walt Disney says, I just have to be committed and take those risks. And so I definitely applied a lot of calculated risk taking. Now, with that, right, comes failure. So you have to minimize those failures and turn them into micro failures so that you can achieve macro successes. And I haven't achieved those macro successes yet, but they're on their way. I'm in the beginning phases of making those failures kind of micro failures and learning as fast and as hard as I can by just getting out there. Going back to my childhood, I had this friend, Justin. Guy was fearless. He would just do whatever, like on the wakeboard. He was always like spinning around, breaking his arm, just like getting hurt all the time. I'm like, this guy's a glutton for punishment, but he was wildly talented. And now he's given lessons in Lake Tahoe and living his dream there and being a park ranger. And it totally awesome for him. And so, I'm just doing that. Or my buddy Daniel, he's making 8 figures a year. voted California's #1 realtor for medium-sized groups. And he just started where he was, right? Everybody starts at the bottom. And there's only up from there. Like, the sky's the limit. And you're really only limited by your talent and your drive and your willingness to learn and to recover. Um, so I would say, having had that experience to kind of test some things in a more post classroom experience really, really helped. Things like leading a team. So I led a team of 27 instructors when I was there as an instructional coach. I led the virtual school and digital curriculum and, went through the whole process. So when it comes to sales, right, I was on the other side. So I kind of know how to wheel and deal, and I can empathize genuinely with districts. It helps that our product sells itself. So that's cool. I'm not having to work so hard on that point, but it comes down to relationships. You're not really selling a product, you are presenting a relationship. And so I'm playing to that strength because I genuinely care. And it makes it easy that I can sell this product because I feel like it's the best tool out there. I genuinely do, and I'm not just saying that. And I sacrificed a lot. I took a pay cut. It was pretty sizable. Um, where I was from, Modesto was home. Now I'm over in the Austin area, moving with 4 kiddos cross country. Like, that's absolutely miserable. I don't recommend that for anyone. That has been so hard, but, like Snoop Dogg says, you gotta pay the cost to be the boss. So, paying that cost to kind of get to that boss level. I started reaching a ceiling where I was hungry for more, and Canva provided me this great opportunity to kind of, take down some of those walls that existed.
Yeah, and I talk about this often with people that I mentor, or I've talked about this a lot on my videos as well. Is just that sometimes you have to take a bit of a pay cut to get ahead. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. But if you can work hard, there are opportunities in which you can increase your salary actually quite fast, I guess you would say. Whereas in teaching, obviously, you have to wait 9 months. You have to get more teaching to come out of your
Right.
pocket. What's really nice, about when you do make the transition to the other side is you had mentioned continuously learning and upskilling. Most of the times, companies will pay for you to upskill because they want you to be the best at what you're doing. And so it's important to also know that that's around the corner for you too. When you were
Yeah.
making the transition, because you were continuously upscaling and you kind of were more so at a higher level, I guess you'd say, in the education system. But did you find that there was anything that you needed to do to upskill to make the transition?
Initially, no. I didn't realize I needed that. I thought it was going to be a more seamless fit,
Yeah.
and I really floundered to upskilling and realizing, like, hey, if I want this sales job and if I want to be good at it, I have to upskill. I got to branch out. I can't just stay within my educator network. I have to start developing a business network on top of that and learning things. So we use a variety of different programs. Like, I know a ton of ed tech programs, but now I got to learn all of these business programs and learn the ins and outs. And it's time consuming. There are weeks where I've worked 80 hours, 40 hours doing the sales stuff, 40 hours learning and burning the candle at both ends, waking up early,
Mhm.
going to bed late. It's just the nature of the beast. If you want to be successful at what you're doing and to be better than the other people that you're surrounded by, either you have to have that natural talent and have it honed and kind of keep feeding that talent, or you have to work harder. For most of
Mhm.
us, it's
Yeah.
working harder. So if you're afraid of that hard work, it's not going to happen. And you have to want it, like Eric Thomas says, more than you want to breathe. I'm not there, but I
Yeah.
want it more than I want to sleep at this point. So
Yeah. And just so you guys know, Scott's really, really is quite new to the transition. So that's why I also wanted to have him as part of this series, because I think it's important. We talk so much about what you need to do to make the transition and what life is really like post transition, but we don't talk enough about what actually happens in that like 0 to 12 months, like a baby, your like infancy stage of like really making the transition. And Scott and I had talked a bit about when I first started doing sales, I felt uncomfortable. It just was a very uncomfortable situation. I was actually physically selling a product, but I felt like I looked at those around me and everyone were like very seasoned salespeople. And I felt like I needed to fit into this box, I guess you would say, of like, I need to be like kind of like drill and kill, like I need to drill and kill this to like kind of get it. And then I started to realize, you know what? I know how to talk to educators and I know how to talk to district personnel and convince them to get products, because that's what I used to do. We used to implement the new products, help coach people. And so I was like, you know what? I don't need to do what these really seasoned salespeople are doing. I can use my own strategy. And I think when you understand that you're the driver for things and you can bring your own personality to it, I think you were actually able to shine more. And I've seen some really great growth in you, understanding that your skill set doesn't have to be like everybody else's, but you have your own unique skill set in which actually can add more value.
yeah, I like that you point that out. And yeah, I always advocate for playing to your strengths, but backing up a little bit, I think it's important when you're new. So I'm still in the infancy. I'm 6 months in. I hear from folks the first year, maybe even two, especially with the move thrown in. That's how long it's going to take you. So
Yeah.
you have to be committed to the process and just know I wouldn't bounce around a lot, especially if you're changing industries. Just stay focused, just kind of head down and just learn as much as you can about the process, about the formulas that different companies use, different organizations. Ask all those questions because at first, I'm used to being like at the top or near top, right? So I came in here, right, thinking like I could do that. I can hit the ground running and be the best of the best instantaneously. And had a harsh reality, right? I'm working my butt off and yet I'm failing and I'm near the bottom. Like, how is this happening? I'm working so hard. I'm so talented. What is it? And what I failed to do was I failed to really just take the time necessary to learn that job, to learn the process, the basics, every little idiosyncrasy. So once I committed to that, I started having more successes and more milestones. And the other thing I do with those milestones is I play little games in my head like, okay, I have this many sales, I need to get to this many. If that goal's too big, what am I going to do if I get like five more or three more? Or can I close out two deals tonight before I go to bed? Okay, I'm not going to bed until I reach X amount of sales. And that was like last night. I'm like, I need to reach X amount. And it was 2:30 in the morning by the time, I did that. And then I put like an exercise, right? You set a goal and then you even push past that because in a race, marathon runners or triathletes will often tell you, you don't push or train just for that race, whatever it is. You train to push past that, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. So that's what I'm applying in sales. And I think it's going to pay dividends in the long run. It doesn't mean I won't mess up. I'm sure I'm going to mess up a ton along the way. So be patient with yourself, but play to your strengths, but also learn the process and trust your gut because there may be times where you just need to sit and get and learn and listen. Then there's other times where you can offer up your valuable advice, your expertise, and, shine a little bit more brightly.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I appreciate you also speaking to knowing that there's failure involved. And I also like how you mention it kind of takes 2 years to kind of transition. It's kind of like the first year and the first like 3 months are like a honeymoon stage.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, whatever. And then the hard hits and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn. Like I really do need to do a lot of learning. And so I think it's good to just be transparent with ourselves sometimes about like what that looks like. And that's okay. It's okay to like do that, be that sort of thing as well. So now that you have transitioned, Scott has still been very active in the ed tech world. You could still catch him on Twitter and things like that. So now that you are fully transitioned, sometimes in the classroom, you just have more time. You've still remained very active in the space and, you presented at conferences and things like that. Now that you've transitioned, do you feel like, I don't know, did you feel any kind of like shift? Like now you're presenting on behalf of Canva. So like it's a different, like vibe, or do you still kind of feel like it's the same thing?
That is tricky because when you work for a company, you're always working for a company. So, yes, I want to remain Scott and do all those things because there's a genuine benefit, especially helping all these folks transitioning to different careers like myself. I get anywhere from 1 to 2 messages a day, Monday through Friday to 6 to 8 on peak days. Like, hey, how is it? How'd you do it? What tips do you have? Can we meet? Right? There's,
Exactly.
all of these questions, and they show up all the time, and I have to manage that because I want to give back. Other people help me. So that's an important part of it for me is giving back and just helping people. And you never know. Wow, like sometimes paths cross, right? And that may lead to another job. You just never know. I've seen that work for people, and I don't do it to get something. You can't. That's the other thing. You have to completely give of yourself for the sake of this other person without expecting anything in return. If you can do that, good things will happen. Maybe not the same thing, but just good things, because people realize that you're there to help. And so when you need a helping hand, like my move was miserable, people from all around the country sent me stuff and helped me out. And wow, I don't know if I would have made it without that. It was so stressful, and I was hanging on by a thread just day after day with the stress. In fact, just today, we were looking for something. We were putting a bed together, and it's like, oh, we don't have all the pieces for the bed. Like that didn't make it over in the move. So we have a bed that is incomplete. So basically, we have no bed. We got to go get like another bed. I'm like, oh, though things will happen. You just have to work through it. Everybody's situation will be different. My situation is unique to me. Your situation, Lena, is unique to you. It doesn't mean one is more impactful or less impactful than the other. It's just different because we're people, we're full of variables. And, I think, looking at things post transition, it's really important to focus on growth and to count those wins. Celebrate those little wins. They may not be the big wins you had. If you transition from the classroom, like Lena said, this is going to be a lot more work. It just is. It sounds crazy, but it's a different kind of work. It's fulfilling in a different way. It's a different kind of challenge. If you like challenges and you like problem solving, coming to the business side, especially on the ed tech side, there's a lot of use for that, and you're going to do well if you can stick it out.
So for those people who are wondering what exactly sales entails, now sales at Canva is a bit different because we're not exactly selling a product on the education side. Now there are other teams in Canva that do financial transactional sales,
right?
But the education side is a bit different. So could you explain to everyone a little bit about like what exactly your day to day kind of looks like?
Yeah. So my day to day is a little bit crazy. You may have to look up some terms. I had to learn all these things. So there's an SDR, right? Then there's a CSM, then your AE, your account executive. I'm all of those. Plus, I'm IT. So I wear all these different hats, just like I wore in the classroom, just like I wore as an instructional technology coach, right? I helped when I did that role. I helped with alt ed, adult ed, helped preschoolers, right? Just all over the board. This specific Canva sales job is a bit like that. And where it differs from those where you're selling a product that is for profit, because Canva for Education is 100% free, always and forever. We don't make money off of this product. So there isn't those kind of financial bonuses attached to it based upon like, hey, you get so many seats. I kind of like that though, because I could sell to a million customers, right? I could get a million different licenses and I'll get paid the same. And you might say, well, why is that? This other person brought 100,000. Well, it's not about that. It's really altruistic in a sense. Like I really believe in Canva's mission and vision, right? To empower others to be a force for good, to set crazy big goals and make them happen. Those kinds of things really resonate deeply with me as a person. That's what I've loved most about the educator community. That's why I hold on to that and will never get away from education. I think it would take either a change in desire, focus, or maybe circumstances, right? Maybe I need to just out of necessity to provide for myself and my family. But unless those conditions change, I love education so much. I'm not leaving. And so I think if you come in with a set of pros and cons and you have kind of your non negotiables and you figure that out ahead of time, so you're not having like an aha moment, like, oh no, here's a non negotiable, they've asked me to do this, it's crossed this line, I can't do it, I got to quit, I got to go back. Like, no, map it out. Take your time. You don't have to be in a hurry. Yes, tons of people are transitioning, but don't be in a rush because you can get yourself into a situation where you're stuck. And maybe the situation's even worse. Maybe you're feeling burnt out and you're leaving because of that. You could find yourself in an even worse position. So take your time, network, learn the job, and, know what you want to do. Set some goals. Goal setting is so important. If the goals change, like in my career, that's okay. Set a new set of goals. It's nice to have some immediate goals, some mid goals, like 1 to 3 years, and then long term goals, 4 to 6 years. And that formula has worked well for many of my successful friends, and it's worked well for me.
Every year at the beginning of the year, I sit down and plan out personal goals. Then I do some professional goals, and then some of just like my own personal professional goals, I guess you would say. I just found that sometimes I need, when I'm going off track or I'm going down, I'm so stressed out about something and I have to like sometimes realign with my true north. And I think that's an important part. If you don't have goals, you never know where you're going to go, right? Like you're just flying by the seat of your pants, which is not the best strategy. I feel like it can work for some people. I've seen some people have great success with that, but sometimes just life never stops being chaotic. So when you can have something to point back to, I think that's also important. And what you mentioned was having small, quick wins, those medium-sized wins, and those large wins. Those are important. And sometimes the pathway changes for how you get there. Yeah. But if you know where you want to go, it's important. And I would say do the same thing in your day-to-day too, like what you're saying. I set like little tiny goals, daily goals every single day. Like, okay, here's what I want to accomplish today. Here's where I want to accomplish by the end of the week, because I can easily get too dug into a task and then like, oh my God, I've done nothing on these other things that I have got to accomplish this week. And then it just ends up being kind of like, a tough piece. So I just appreciate, you saying all of those things. I think it's important for people to kind of have that glimpse and for people to kind of understand, that sometimes these sales roles vary from company to company. And what you're saying, and I did the same thing at Code Monkey. I was everything. I was a PD trainer. I did all the webinars. I did all the professional development. I was selling to people. Then when people had the products sold to, then I would onboard them. I would make sure that they were good for the life cycle of their, then when it came to renewals, I was the person they were talking to. So it kind of teaches you a lot. And it also gives you a pretty good idea if you're really unsure. Something like sales or a customer success manager are really good entry-level roles for you to step into, because then you get to learn. What's nice about sales and customer success is you're talking to product managers, you're talking to the research team, you're talking to the social media team, you're involved in everything, because at the end of the day, you're the person hearing from the customer. So everybody needs your insight. And so it also gives you a great way to collaborate, communicate, across the company too, because then you get to see all these different roles and you're like, ooh, so you may be in sales and be like, I like it. It's not my rest of my life or type of thing, but you may connect with someone on the product and be like, oh my gosh, this is where I want to go. And so it kind of gives you a different idea. So you get hungry and learn knowledge within the companies once you get settled in a role too.
You're so right. There was a lot you said there. I just want to affirm everything. So we're plus wanting all of that. That's all good stuff. And I think a good jumping point is talking about the sales and CSM roles. I think they're a natural fit for educators. I think a lot of these companies see that too, and they're hungry to get teachers in there because we are relational. We can drive PD. We can craft stories, right? To tell something, right? I shared my story about, starting as a graphic designer and now ending up, and I'll bring up to certain clients that it was really a dream of mine between the time I was 12 and 16 to work for a startup. Now I'm doing that. I'm living my childhood dream. Never give up on your dreams. I mean, you talked about the ebbs and flows and just how life can take you. That's crazy. I thought I would have worked for a startup in my early 20s, not later in life, like where I'm at right now. But it's still so exciting. I'm still so happy, and it seems silly, but like fulfilling that childhood dream is kind of neat.
It is. I think it's very meaningful to kind of have those and like look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this is something I dreamed about, years and years ago. And now here I am. So I think it's really cool to have those reflections too. If you were to talk to a job seeker, teacher transitioner today, are there any tips that you would give them when they're beginning their journey?
So network. And with that, clean up your LinkedIn, do your resume different for each job, curtail it for the job. If it's worth applying for, it's worth doing right. It's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to be fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's super boring. I just put on these headphones, crank up the tunes, make a little game of it. Like, okay, I did 3 applications this hour. How many can I do next hour? And it's kind of like that. It's monotonous. It's painful. To kind of cut through that a little bit, always reach out to the recruiters. You're not sure? Ask. You'll learn. You'll figure out tips and tricks. It's going to be a little different for everybody. Talk to the hiring managers. Find out who works there. Make those connections. And don't just add people blindly. And don't just be dropping notes in everybody's DMs. Like there's a fine balance. Like be patient. Read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People and become genuinely interested in what somebody else does. And Patrick Bet-David talks about not asking for something, but offering what you can give. I've done that and it has worked so well. I had a friend who did that when we were doing graphic design. I felt I was clearly the better graphic designer, but 9 times out of 10, people chose to work with him. I'm like, why is that? My design's so much better. And I would even test this sometimes, like do a blind design test and show somebody his design, show them my design for their whatever they were wanting for their mock-up, and they would choose mine. But it came down to those relationships. And I didn't get that then. I definitely failed at that, but I learned that later. And so definitely invest in those relationships. You never know what's going to happen. You just absolutely never know. And people will surprise you. You may not think very highly of somebody, and then they'll just have this monumental success. And you're like, wow, I had no idea they were capable of that. And that's just life. That's just people. People are pretty amazing that way. And so just be open to the possibilities. Don't close yourself off. And happy job hunting too. It's exciting. It's a wild ride.
It is definitely a wild ride, but I think that you have given quite a lot of tips for our job seekers, and just knowing that nothing comes without hard work. That's just the plain and simple truth of it. And if you can be open, authentic, people are going to be able to read that too. And, we always talk about doing your resumes, and those are all really good, important information. But if you take away anything from any of these series, obviously it's doing your resume, making sure you have LinkedIn, but it's making sure that your connections are intentional and thoughtful, and that your networking is intentional and thoughtful, because all of those things, you never know. You just never know where they're going to lead or where they're going to. And if you leave a bad taste in people's mouth, people talk.
Yes.
and they're going to know that you left that bad taste in somebody's mouth. So I think it's important to know that, and know that you may take a pay cut. That's just something I cannot stress this enough, that you may have that experience. I know teachers are thinking, I'm going to make this masterful leap. The difference, though, is what you can make in 3 years as a regular person outside the classroom is going to surpass what you could have made in the classroom. So just think about that you're making an investment in yourself. Well, Scott, I'm so happy that you joined us on today's episode, and I will leave all of his ways that you can connect with him down below in the show notes, as I always do. And if you have any questions, Scott is a great networker, so make sure to reach out to him and connect with him, listen to his podcast, follow him on Twitter, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much. You've made it this far. I appreciate all of your support. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, throw the comments below in the comment section. I'm always looking for new ideas and hot trends, or if you're looking to sponsor our podcast and video episodes, reach out to us on any of our social media channels. And you can even find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Once again, my name's Leena Marie Saleh, the Edtech Guru, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.